Okay, let's start with a simple question for you. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Mm,
Was it maybe a quick bowl of cereal, or did you go all out with an omelet?
good question.
And think about, say, that last big decision you made, maybe at work, or even just what to watch tonight. Did you really choose that? I mean, truly.
Or was it something else, a result of, I don't know, a whole bunch of complex processes happening completely beyond your control?
Exactly. And this is where it gets really fascinating, because today we're doing a deep dive into the work of Sam Harris.
Mhm.
He's a neuroscientist, a philosopher,
Right.
and he makes this incredibly bold claim
Hmm.
that our gut feeling, our deep intuition about having free will, it's basically an illusion.
It's a huge claim, really challenges how we see ourselves.
It's a heavy thought, I know.
It absolutely is. And what's so compelling, I think, is that Harris isn't just, philosophizing in an armchair. He's trying to ground this idea in actual neuroscience.
Okay.
So our mission today is to really unpack that provocative claim. We'll look at the scientific evidence he uses.
And then, importantly, weigh it against some pretty strong counter-arguments from other thinkers, too.
Right, get the whole picture.
Exactly. The goal is to help you get a better handle on what it means to be, well, a conscious person in this world of cause and effect.
Okay, so let's jump right in. This big claim, free will is an illusion. How does Harris start to build that case? Where does he see the problem with our usual way of thinking?
Well, he starts by saying our belief in free will doesn't really come from logic or careful reasoning.
Okay. Where does it come from then?
It's more about intuition, a feeling. It just feels like we're in the driver's seat, making choices.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. I feel like I'm choosing things all day long.
We all do. But Harris argues that gut feeling is actually misleading us. He says free agency, the kind we usually imagine, just doesn't exist in reality.
So the feeling is real, but what it points to isn't. That's the core of it, yeah. He suggests that the subjective experience, wrestling with a decision, weighing pros and cons, that feeling doesn't actually reveal the real reasons behind our thoughts and actions.
So deciding to, I don't know, work late instead of going out,
Yeah.
that conscious thought isn't the start of the decision.
It's part of the process, he'd say, but not the ultimate origin. The feeling of deciding might just be tagging along.
Okay, so what does he mean by illusion then? What does that feel like practically? It sounds pretty confusing.
It is confusing. What he means is that our inner experience, that feeling of free will, it doesn't match up with the underlying physical reality of how our brains work.
Right.
There's this interesting parallel, psychologist Michael Clayton points it out, connecting Harris's ideas to B.F. Skinner.
Oh, the behaviorist guy with the pigeons and rats.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Skinner argued our actions are basically just the result of conditioning, rewards, and punishments, right? And Skinner believed that feelings, like the feeling of freedom, are often mistaken for the causes of our behavior just because they happen around the same time.
So the feeling doesn't cause the action, it just
Mhm.
happens alongside it.
Exactly. It's a correlation, not causation, in Skinner's view. And Harris builds on similar ideas with neuroscience. Some scientists even talk about this experience of free will as like a sophisticated trick the brain plays on itself.
A trick. How so?
Well, the idea is that the brain might actually construct the experience of making a choice after the underlying neural processes have already made the decision.
Wait, so the feeling of choosing comes after the choice is made?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
What feels like us consciously deciding before acting might actually be the other way around. The brain sets things in motion and then creates this narrative, this feeling that I consciously chose to do that.
Wow. Okay, that's genuinely unsettling. Like our conscious mind is just catching up and taking credit.
Sort of, yeah. It definitely makes you rethink things.
It really does. So if our conscious feeling of choice is maybe just this post hoc story, what does Harris say is driving our actions? What's his first big piece of evidence against free will?
His first major insight revolves around what he calls prior causes.
Prior causes, okay.
The idea is that every single thought you have, every intention that pops into your head emerges from these prior causes, things that happened before.
So even though it feels like I am in control, like there's this central me making decisions.
Harris would say, well, yes, you feel that, but it's actually your brain doing all the work, generating thoughts, initiating actions, even creating that very sense of a self that feels like it's in charge.
So the me is more like the output of the brain's processing rather than the input.
That's a good way to put it. He stresses that these unconscious brain processes, the ones actually determining your thoughts and actions, are shaped by countless things from your past. things you're not aware of, things you definitely didn't choose, like your genes, your upbringing, experiences you had years ago.
Can you give a really simple everyday example?
Sure. Think about standing in the grocery store, trying to pick a cereal.
Okay, done that many times.
You feel like you're freely choosing, right? Maybe between flakes and crunchy clusters.
Yeah, feels like my choice.
But Harris would argue that decision is actually being guided by this whole hidden network of prior causes. Ads you saw last week, maybe without even noticing. What cereal you liked as a kid, your inherited preference for certain tastes, an article about fiber you skimmed, even just the color of the box catching your eye.
Huh. So all those things are bubbling under the surface, pushing me towards one box.
Exactly. And for Harris, if your thoughts and actions are ultimately determined by these kinds of causes, things outside your conscious awareness and control, well, that system just isn't compatible with what we normally mean by free will.
Your breakfast choice wasn't really yours in the deepest sense. It was just the endpoint of all these unconscious factors. Wow. That's a serious challenge. But is it really that simple?
Nah.
Are there counter-arguments to this idea that prior causes eliminate free will entirely?
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge point of debate. John Horgan, for example, he's a science writer. He generally agrees with Harris that, yeah, okay, our choices are definitely constrained by our genes, our past, our environment, all that stuff.
Right, that seems reasonable.
But Horgan says, look, being constrained isn't the same as choices being non-existent. Just because our freedom is limited doesn't mean we have no freedom at all.
So it's not necessarily black and white for Horgan. It's more like shades of gray.
Kind of, yeah. He thinks we can acknowledge limitations without throwing the whole idea of meaningful choice out the window.
What else does Horgan say?
He also makes a really interesting point about consciousness itself. He says, okay, Harris points to all these physical processes in the brain determining things, but those same physical processes somehow give rise to incredibly complex things like mind and consciousness.
Any things we don't fully understand yet.
Exactly. Things science can't just explain purely physically, at least not yet. So Horgan questions Harris's leap, this assumption that because we haven't scientifically proven or fully explained free will, it must be an illusion.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
It's like saying, we don't understand how consciousness works, therefore consciousness isn't real. Which seems premature.
Precisely. And that connects directly to another critique, this one from philosopher Eddie Namias.
Okay.
Namias basically argues that science works incrementally. You know, we figure things out piece by piece. We shouldn't jump to massive conclusions like free will doesn't exist just because the current science is incomplete.
So he thinks Harris is defining free will too narrowly, maybe.
Yes, he thinks Harris sets up a definition of free will that's almost impossible to meet given any scientific understanding of the brain, and then says, see, it doesn't exist. Namias argues this actually shuts down scientific progress on understanding how consciousness and thinking and maybe even free will do work. He's saying scientists should be trying to discover how it works, not just dismiss it based on a particular definition.
That's a really important counterpoint. Keep digging. Don't just close the door. Okay, so Harris's first point is prior causes. What's his second big insight driving this idea that free will is an illusion?
His second insight is that our thoughts and intentions don't just arise from prior causes, but also from the fundamental laws of nature. And that includes elements of chance or randomness.
Okay, explain that a bit more.
Well, the brain is a physical system, right? Made of atoms, subject to the laws of physics, chemistry, biology.
Right.
So it reacts to physical stuff. Stimuli from the outside world, processes happening inside your body. And these reactions, governed by natural laws, produce the nerve impulses, the chemical releases that we eventually interpret as our own desires, decisions, thoughts.
So even a sudden urge, like wanting ice cream, is just physics and chemistry unfolding in my head according to predictable laws.
Largely, yes. But it might not be just predictable laws. Harris also includes the role of chance, random events at the quantum level, or just the random firing of synapses. These can also influence which thoughts or impulses arise.
So it's a mix of deterministic cause and effect and maybe some pure randomness bubbling up.
That's the picture he paints. Let's go back to that ice cream example. You're walking in the park, you feel hungry, you see the truck, you decide to buy a cone.
Feels like my decision.
Harris would say that decision is the output of a whole cascade of physical events. Your brain detecting low blood sugar maybe, processing the sight and sound of the truck, accessing memories of ice cream, releasing dopamine in anticipation, weighing factors like cost or diet, all physical processes.
And none of that requires a free conscious chooser stepping in.
Not in his view. The choice simply emerges from that complex physical interplay governed by natural laws and maybe a bit of randomness.
I remember reading about a related idea, epiphenomenalism. That sounds even more extreme.
It is pretty extreme and definitely controversial. Epiphenomenalism is the theory that our conscious experiences, our thoughts, feelings, the feeling of deciding are like froth on a wave,
Froth.
meaning they're just byproducts, epiphenomena, of the underlying physical events in the brain. They're caused by the physical stuff, but they don't cause anything themselves.
So my thoughts and feelings have no effect on my actions. They don't do anything.
According to strict epiphenomenalism, no. Your actions are caused solely by the physical chain of events. Your feeling of wanting the ice cream doesn't cause you to buy it. Both the feeling and the action are caused by underlying brain processes.
Wow. So consciousness is just along for the ride, watching the show but not directing it?
That's the implication. It basically suggests our conscious mental life serves no real purpose in terms of behavior. It's a very unsettling idea for most people because it seems to strip away agency and meaning completely.
Yeah, profoundly unsettling. Okay, this leads us naturally to compatibilism.
Yeah.
Because surely people have tried to find a way to reconcile the science with some notion of freedom, right?
Absolutely. Compatibilism is a major school of thought that tries to do exactly that. Compatibilists generally accept the scientific picture that our actions are determined by prior causes and natural laws.
Okay.
But, and this is the key thing they argue, that even within that deterministic picture, there's still room for a meaningful kind of freedom and responsibility.
How do they manage that? Sounds like trying to square a circle. Daniel Dennett is a big name here, right?
He is. Dennett is probably the most famous contemporary compatibilist, and he has a very interesting take.
What's his argument?
Dennett basically says, look, even if our thoughts and actions arise from unconscious processes shaped by prior causes, those processes are happening in our brains. They are our processes.
So anything my brain does, I did.
That's the essence of it. Dennett thinks Harris creates this artificial divide, like there's a conscious me and then this separate alien unconscious brain doing things to me. Dennett says, no, it's all you.
Okay.
And Dennett argues we absolutely are free in meaningful ways. We can reflect, we can deliberate, we can